The Palmdale community remembering Gabriel Fernandez on what would have been his 18th birthday. The little boy killed 10 years ago in a shocking case of child abuse. Welcome back to Eyewitness News at 4. I'm Michelle Fisher.
And I'm Jory Rand. Today, Gabriel's loved ones are keeping his memory alive as they comfort the family of another young boy who met the same fate.
Living in a hell every single day, trapped in a nightmare, ending only with your destruction at the hands of two psychopaths who'd never feel a shred of regret. That was Gabriel Fernandez's reality, an 8-year-old forced to endure unimaginable torment, abuse so horrific it's beyond comprehension. Most kids have loving homes, but Gabriel was different. He went from a normal childhood straight to hell. This video covers Gabriel's story, the horrors he faced, and his soul-crushingly tragic end. Gabriel Fernandez was born in 2005 with a difficult early life. As long as he could remember, his mother had hated him with a fierce intensity. Her hatred of him was subhuman, often boiling over into violent abuse whenever she was with him. It's safe to say life with her mother was the closest thing to hell on earth. However, unlike hell, the people being hurt aren't deserving of punishment. It's clear that Pearl Fernandez, his mother, didn't want anything to do with her son. Because of her disinterest and active malice, she chose to send away her son so that she didn't even have to look at him. For the first 7 years of Gabriel's life, he was happy. He got to live with his grandparents, who were kind and doting. However, they were not perfect. Some of their ideals and smaller actions could very easily have sent the wrong message to someone. However, they were ultimately good people who encouraged Gabriel to be a kind and giving person. However, this begs the question of how these two kind and caring people could raise a daughter to turn into such a monster. After Gabriel turned 7, he was sent back home. Without anyone to intervene or protect him, his mother and her boyfriend had complete freedom to mistreat him as much as they wanted. Gabriel was plucked out of heaven in a situation that no child should ever have to go through. Simply trying to understand how that feels is difficult, like being in hell looking up at heaven. He had known what it was like not to be afraid for his life every day, and he can see those outside of his home going through the normal lives. Something that many victims of child abuse don't have an easy time understanding is that people outside of their situation don't constantly suffer like them. This is tragic because not knowing that happiness is possible only leads to more suffering. But in the case of Gabriel, he knew that life could have joy, and he wanted to escape it all. Despite that, he was unable to free himself even if he wanted to escape. In a sense, the knowledge that life could be better only served to taunt him. He had been robbed. For reference, the abuse that Gabriel had gone through was nightmarish. And when I recount what happened, I need to make it clear that these were common occurrences, not one-time events. During his time with his mother, he was mangled and tortured, punished for sins he did not commit by a subhuman monster that didn't care. Every day he was beaten, burned, and shot with a BB gun, forced to eat cat shit, locked in a small cabinet for hours, starved to the point of malnutrition. He was forced to wear girls' clothing as a way to humiliate him, and through it all he was verbally abused, called gay, and other slurs and many other criminally abusive actions on a daily basis. Despite multiple reports from teachers, family members, and even social workers about the abuse, the authorities failed to intervene in time. A single one of these events would be enough to ruin someone's life. Imagine it, a moment so powerful it could shatter anyone's sense of safety. Your mother, worn down by years of mistreatment and stress, suddenly becomes something unrecognizable. You make a small mistake, something as simple as forgetting to clean, but the reaction is anything but small. Her presence looms over you, and the weight of her anger crushes you. It feels like the world is closing in, the air thick and suffocating, as though you're trapped beneath something far too heavy to escape. Your mind is spinning, disoriented, and you can't remember what happens next. But every time you're near her, or anywhere near that room, your body tenses, bracing itself against something you can't fully remember. But you know it's there, waiting. What I need to stress is that this was repeated. Simply imagining one of these events is nightmarish. Simply trying to understand the effects that it'd have to have gone through that time and time again is impossible. The human mind is not meant to be able to comprehend the sheer trauma that comes from something like lifelong abuse. I can't help but imagine what Gabriel would look and act like as an adult. Statistically speaking, he's likely not going to enjoy a very good life. Most people who are stuck in abusive situations like this often end up acclimating to them, to the point that they bounce between abusers, and even when they escape the cycle, there's an emptiness in them. All they knew was pain. They know that it would have killed them if they stayed in their situation, but to a certain extent, it's like being in a world of pure darkness while being on fire. You have the opportunity to simply extinguish the fire and leave. But the darkness is scary, and when you're in a cage for so long, the pain starts to become comforting in a way. A fucked up little routine. And what I fear is that even if Gabriel is able to escape all the abuse, he would never be okay ever again. Child abuse, even something as simple as verbal abuse, can leave people with lifelong mental illnesses and conditions. And when you think about the intensity of what Gabriel went through, it's truly horrifying to imagine what a day in his life would be like even as an adult. Almost everything would hurt all the time. Here's something you may have noticed. I said, what he would look like. That's because when you don't have any checks to limit the intensity of an abuser's actions, then only get more and more extreme. And in the case of Gabriel, he was already experiencing some of the most extreme abuse, and there's only one thing worse than abuse: killing. On May 22, 2013, Gabriel Fernandez and Isauro Aguirre inflicted a final brutal beating on Gabriel. He was found unconscious with a fractured skull, broken ribs, and BB pellets embedded in his skin. When paramedics arrived, they described his body as resembling that of a torture victim. He was rushed to the hospital but died 2 days later on May 24, 2013. Legal punishment. For a crime as terrible as what they did, Gabriel Fernandez and Isauro Aguirre were both convicted of first-degree murder and torture. Pearl pleaded guilty and was given life in prison without parole, whereas Isauro Aguirre was sentenced to death in 2018. The 4 social workers who ignored the case were also charged with felony child abuse and falsifying public records, but their case was later dismissed. All of this begs the question: what kind of person could possibly go ahead with such terrible crimes? Pearl had always been a terrible person. Throughout her life, she had a pattern of substance abuse, including alcohol and drugs, and an inability to care about anyone's well-being. She also had a history of unstable relationships, going from one abusive partner to another. She was used goods, abused by society, to the point that she could barely function as a person who reached for drugs and abusive relationships because they were the closest thing to a facsimile of happiness. She was miserable, and she had only ever known misery, so when she was given a child, she could only ever see the child like a parasite or a burden. This inevitably resulted in her externalizing her hurt, like a child throwing a tantrum. However, she isn't a child, and the pain she caused is immense and barely comprehensible in IUT's sheer horror. This was only compounded by Pearl's boyfriend at the time, Isauro Aguirre, a criminal. He had illegally immigrated in from Mexico and had a criminal recording including multiple charges of violence and aggression. He was known for his explosive rage, which resulted in him very quickly becoming abusive toward Gabriel when he was in a position similar to that of a stepfather. He would be the one to carry out the punishments in the household. The two of them were responsible for the slow and painful deterioration of Gabriel both mentally and physically. This would eventually result in them killing Gabriel in their self-gratifying need to constantly punish him. Even after the law had caught up to the two, neither of them felt any real remorse for what they did. Showing little emotion in their trail, they were only regretting their actions because they were forced to take responsibility for the infinitely nightmarish torture hell that they put an innocent child through. The outrage was instant. Gabriel's story sparked national outrage over the failures of Child Protective Services and how they and their inability to help Gabriel out of that situation resulted in something that no one, let alone a child, would have to go through. This resulted in people talking about the many ways in which we can reform child welfare services to prevent similar tragedies in the future. In addition to that, news outlets to this day mourn the untimely loss of Gabriel and how inexcusable his parents' actions were. ABC 7. Eyewitness News released the following message across their many social media accounts. Today on 20th February 2025, we remember Gabriel Fernandez on what would have been his 20th birthday. I can't believe he's been gone that long now. I remember hearing them say his mama got thrown to the wolves in prison and the stepfather took death row, so we know he's protected. He was tortured and killed by his mother and her boyfriend when he was just 8 years old. In the end, the story of Gabriel Fernandez is one that serves as a heartbreaking reminder of the darkness that can exist within families and the systems meant to protect vulnerable children. His death, a senseless and unimaginable tragedy, exposed the flaws within child welfare services, highlighting the devastating consequences of their failure to intervene when so many people saw the signs. Gabriel, a boy who deserved nothing but love, compassion, and safety, was denied these basic rights, and the consequences of that denial were catastrophic. While justice has been served to an extent, Pearl Fernandez and Isauro Aguirre now face the consequences of their actions. The true cost of Gabriel's life cannot be measured. The scars of abuse, whether physical or emotional, endure long after the body has gone. And for Gabriel, his story has become a symbol of the immense damage that unchecked violence and neglect can inflict on a child. Though Gabriel's life was cruelly stolen from him, his memory lives on, sparking conversations about reform and the urgent need for better protection and support for children in dangerous situations. Gabriel's death, while tragic, has inspired many to advocate for a better, more effective child welfare system, one where children like him never have to endure such horrors again. Gabriel Fernandez's story may have ended far too soon, but his legacy will continue to remind us of the importance of standing up for those who cannot stand for themselves. His memory serves as a call to action, to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again, and to honor the life of a boy who, in the brief years he had, deserved so much more.